Reef swiveled in his chair and saw her in the doorway. Stephen had fallen asleep a while earlier, but Reef hadn't wanted to take the chance of disturbing him by leaving the room. He sat quietly, watching the sheet over Stephen's chest rise and fall, rise and fall. There was something about that movement, repetitive and endless, that made him think about the events of the last few weeks, made him wonder if everything was automatic or if a person could actually change things, could make a difference somehow. He was still mulling over that question when Lisa arrived. He carefully lifted the newspaper from his lap and laid it on Stephen's table, then eased himself up from the chair. The vinyl seat pad made an embarrassing sucking sound as he peeled himself off it. He colored, shrugged his shoulders in an "it wasn't me" motion, and moved quietly to the door. Out in the hall, he felt suddenly awkward, unsure what to say. The events of the previous afternoon suddenly a lifetime ago. What did he know about talking to girls like her? He looked over her head for signs of Carly or Brett, but saw none. Cleared his throat. "Hi," he said finally, like he was 12. "Hi." He could tell she felt the same awkwardness, and it made him think about Bigger's dog, Ripper, the ugliest mutt on the planet. Reef had never had a pet, didn't know what everyone else knew about dogs, and the first time he'd seen Ripper, he'd made the mistake of patting him right away. Hadn't waited for the dog to sniff him first, to look him over. Since then, Reef hadn't been able to drop by Bigger's house without the animal snarling at him, then slinking off when Bigger told him to shut the fuck up. The dog didn't trust him. He wondered if people could be like that, wondered if too much too soon made a difference, if maybe Lisa was wary of him now. Then again, she was no dog, not by a long shot. So, they both said it, at exactly the same time. Then they were laughing, and Reeve felt the easiness of the previous day settle around them. Had lunch yet? Lisa asked. Reeve shook his head. What time is it? Almost noon? Reeve looked at the hall clock over her head to confirm what she'd said. He lost all track of time, probably because of that article in the paper. You want to grab a bite in the cafeteria? She asked. He thought about Bigger's dog again, wondered if maybe he was making a mistake. Fuck it, he thought. How'd you like some real food? He asked. Carly had made them promise to be back by 2 o'clock, but Reef had called from a payphone and asked for an extension. He'd taken Lisa to the public gardens, and time had seemed to melt there in the hot August sun. Despite her mother's encouragement, Lisa hadn't been outside the rehab once. Now she regretted all the time she'd spent indoors. The ride wasn't comfortable. Her wheelchair on the pathways joggled her uncomfortably from side to side, but Reef was very careful. It took a lot out of her, but not nearly as much as it would have if Val hadn't been driving her so hard in physio. And besides, she loved seeing all the flowers in bloom, grass and hedges neatly trimmed, kids feeding the ducks bits of bread, street artist sketches and paintings pinned on lines strung along the fence around the gardens. By the time they left, both of their stomachs were complaining loudly. Reef had some trouble maneuvering her chair across the busy intersection at Spring Garden and South Park. The walk sign flashed for only a few moments, and they were barely halfway across when the hand lit up, making it necessary for Reeve to push the wheelchair faster, jiggling Lisa painfully. Getting the chair up onto the sidewalk and in through the Dairy Queen entrance was even trickier. Reeve had expected people to be more polite, but several had rushed past them before a woman stopped and held the door open so they could enter. Reeve seethed at the idiots who ignored them, then suddenly remembered how he'd looked away from the patients Brett had introduced him to. Pretended they weren't there. He shrugged the thought away. You think too much, he told himself. You sure you want to do this? Asked Lisa as she scanned the menu on the wall behind the counter. The pain in her pelvis and leg had begun to talk to her, reminding her it was still there, stretching its claws under the morphine, waiting, just so she knew it wasn't going anywhere. Business at the Dairy Queen on Spring Garden Road was brisk, and there were several people in line in front of them.